There's a side of Juneteenth that most people never hear about. Yes, they tell us about the parades, the cookouts, the red drinks, the music, the delayed freedom finally reaching Texas, and that's the version that feels safe. But behind that, behind the smiling photos and the holiday sales, there was something else happening, something spiritual. Because for the enslaved, freedom wasn't just a matter of waiting on soldiers to arrive. It wasn't just hoping that a document would magically reach the right hands and free them. It was a spiritual warfare for them, fought in whispers, in secret rooms, in fields at night, in the corners of cabins where herbs were crushed, candles were lit, and prayers were whispered under their breath. It was hoodoo. It was root work. It was calling on ancestors whose names had been stolen, but whose power remained alive. While the world waited for freedom to come by law, our ancestors were working for it spiritually, fighting back in ways the oppressor couldn't see but felt. And today, we're going to talk about that side of Juneteenth, the side they didn't teach in school, the side where hoodoo became resistance. Hey y'all, I'm YaYa. Happy Juneteenth. And today we're going to take Juneteenth beyond the surface, not just the history, but the spiritual undercurrent that still runs deep even today. Because our people didn't just wait for freedom, they worked for it physically and spiritually. And even today, a lot of things we do is hoodoo in disguise. So here's a quick refresher on Juneteenth. So really quick for anyone who might not fully know the backstory, why is it a holiday? The Emancipation Proclamation was signed by Abraham Lincoln in 1863, technically freeing enslaved people in Confederate states. But the problem was not everybody wanted to honor that. It took until June 19th, 1865, a full 2.5 years later, for Union soldiers to finally roll up until Galveston, Texas, and enforce that freedom. That's where Juneteenth comes from. June 19th. So June 19th, 1865 marks the day when enslaved people in Galveston, Texas finally learned that slavery had ended 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. So during slavery, Black people carried spiritual traditions that were often disguised for survival. Hoodoo, also called root work or conjure, became a way for many people to protect themselves, seek justice, and call on ancestors for strength. Now, in secret, rituals were performed to protect families, resist oppression, and spiritually bind those who meant them harm. Hoodoo was never just about spells, it was about survival, it was about resistance, it was reclaiming power in a system designed to strip their power away. Even after emancipation, hoodoo continued as a quiet form of spiritual protection, because I'm sure we all know once slavery ended, it wasn't all peaches and cream. You still have Black communities, even to this day, vulnerable to violence, economic oppression, systematic racism. And this is where hoodoo gave those individuals a spiritual weapon when the physical options were limited. So when we celebrate Juneteenth, yes, we're celebrating freedom, but for many of us, we're also honoring the ancestors who not only fought physically, but spiritually for that exact freedom. And hoodoo played a major role in that fight. Now think about it. If you were in Texas in 1865, you might have heard rumors that slavery had ended elsewhere, but you were still trapped. And that's the exact kind of mental, emotional, and spiritual pressure that can break a person. But instead, a lot of our ancestors leaned on spiritual practice that gave them the power where the law wouldn't. They might have whispered prayers at night. They might have carried roots and herbs sewn into their clothing for protection. They might have anointed their children with oils to keep them safe. In some cases, there are stories where enslaved people performed entire rituals calling on the ancestors and spirits to bring about their freedom. And we know from oral traditions passed down that very specific rituals were common for protection, just a few. Carrying High John the Conqueror root, which is a powerful symbol of strength, luck, and overcoming obstacles. Enslaved men would often tuck a small piece inside their clothing when facing dangerous situations. And of course, making mojo bags, which is basically a small pouch filled with herbs and protective amulets, along with personal items like that individual's hair or nail clippings. These bags were hidden in garments sewn into hems or worn around the neck.